Hello, this is Thomas J. Churchill. Welcome to another episode of Church's Hollywood Moment. Action. Today we will be diving into a Q&A session that I sat in for West Side Story with the man himself, Steven Spielberg. Steven Spielberg is one of the most influential personalities in the history of cinema. Steven Spielberg is Hollywood's best-known director, up there with Alfred Hitchcock. And, you know, these two guys, Alfred Hitchcock obviously is one of my favorite directors of all time, and Steven Spielberg is up there as well, very influential for me as a filmmaker. And, you know, I've been labeled Little Spielberg at times, and in high school, the newspaper, I believe it was the New York Newsday, labeled me the Spielberg of Franklin K. Lane High School. So I had an opportunity to get a chance to sit and listen to Steven and the rest of the cast of West Side Story, and got a chance to meet him briefly. It was a day I wouldn't forget. Here's the interview.
And the man Spielberg. And cinematographer Janusz Kaminski. Janusz, I should say. In Janusz's case, he's worked with Mr. Spielberg quite a few times. You may know Saving Private Ryan, Catch Me If You Can, Schindler's List, War of the Worlds, Minority Report. I mean, you two. Amazing. And I thought you brought it, kept it in the time, and brought it up to date here in terms of what's going on in the world and the meaning it has now, which is absolutely extraordinary when you look at this.
Well, that was part of the reason I wanted to do it again. The other part was just unadulterated love for the original 1957 Broadway musical, which I listened to ad nauseum as a kid, as a 10-year-old when we first got the album. And I had memorized every song, and it was my favorite musical, and today it still is my favorite musical. I think that and Porgy and Bess are the two greatest American operas that ever written. But the leap of faith and the danger was how much I adored the Robert Wise-Droom Robin 61 movie, which I love so much. And that was always what kept me from doing this 15 years ago. That was always worrying me. But when the Times started to, meaning not the New York Times, the era that we live in, started to echo the themes of West Side Story. You know, love and hate, war and peace, and with no détente. When things started to look really like West Side Story was coming back into the news, especially along the borders, Tony Kushner and I really felt strongly that this was the time to start to mount this production, because it would have some relevant meaning today.
Yeah, and Tony Kushner, who you've worked with on Munich and Lincoln, obviously.
When things started to look really like West Side Story was coming back into the news, especially along the borders, Tony Kushner and I really felt strongly that this was the time to start to mount this production because it would have some relevant meaning today.
Yeah, and Tony Kushner, who you've worked with on Munich and Lincoln, obviously, did an exceptional screenplay here in bringing out all of this that, we may not have thought of with the original movie. And the time is right now, 60 years exactly later.
60 years exactly, and the thing that Tony did, which I thought was so profound, was that he basically, he made this into a street musical and took as much of the theatricality out of it as was possible, but after all, it is a musical. But it needed to make a deep dive into the realism of the characters, their relationships, and the issues that were dividing the Sharks and the Jets, which was so contemporary. And so the language, and Tony Kushner's incredible use of scene study, the incredible use of these very profound moments that he came up with, that's sort of what separated our reimagining of West Side Story from the original 57 musical by these four, great gay Jewish geniuses. Leonard Bernstein, Stephen Sondheim, Arthur Lawrence, and of course Jerome Robbins.
And Stephen Sondheim, I saw just a few weeks before he died, he was on Stephen Colbert, and he was going, "Man, it's good. He goes like, "I've seen it, and it's so good." And so we had the chance to get this man who, was so integral in creating this in the first place. And what was that like, having him involved here?
He was sitting right here every day for 3 weeks, right next to me in the recording studio in New York, when we laid all the tracks down of all the performing artists, right?
Yeah, it was really intense. Yeah, well, and he is, he really kind of communicated through Stephen most of the time. Stephen, you were Stephen 2. He was Stephen 1.
Well, I named him. We made a deal, and it was my idea. I said, "You're Stephen 1, and I'm Stephen 2. Period." That's it.
But it was really special because he, I don't know, he just he had a way about him. He would just sit there and he would listen, and then he'd say a few things. And I remember the first time I was in the recording studio, he didn't say much. I think he just was watching and looking, and it made me very nervous. Mm-hmm. And then afterwards, he was just like, where did you come from? And I was like, I'm not sure, but I'm really happy to be here. He's like, that was a really interesting version of the quintet. And I was like, I'm going to take that as a compliment, and I just kept it moving. But everybody had these little moments with him in different ways. I know Rachel's experience with him was really profound, and that's the thing. He was a prolific songwriter, a prolific lyricist who changed the way all of us hear and receive and think and feel in regards to the American musical. And we get to be a part of his legacy, and that is potentially one of the greatest honors of any of our careers in a way. Like it's a real high point, just saying.
Just before the New York premiere, Steve and I during COVID, because I didn't know this before I met him, I discovered that he knows more about motion picture history than me, Scorsese, and Guillermo del Toro put together. He really does. That's not hyperbole. He is a profound scholar of the classic motion pictures, the B movies, everything this town produced since the silent era. He knows them all. And so all through COVID, we were exchanging movies and talking about them we emailed each other. I have like hundreds of pages of emails between Steve and I during that whole period of time. And the thing that he really respected and understood was cinema. And he really understood cinema. And I remember when I met him, one of the first times I met him, our company made Sweeney Todd into a movie that Tim Burton directed. And I met him at the first screening of that. And he loved Tim's version of Sweeney Todd. He was very complimentary. But Steve was always reminding me, I'm not saying I got this idea from Steve, but he always reminded me of most musicals, the camera is sitting where you're sitting, watching a rectangle. It's so often musicals are staged on a horizontal plane so the dancers and the singers can move left to right, right to left, but the camera either moves with them left to right, right to left, but rarely goes in and becomes involved with them. And when Steve first saw the movie, he was really happy that the camera was dancing along with Justin Peck's choreography.
I was going to ask Janus that, because the movement here is so, it's different, definitely, and I love the Robert Wise version, but the camera movement here is clearly different, and it's its own dancer.
Well, we've both attended the rehearsals of the dancers, actors, and it was very clear from very beginning that we have a chance here to introduce another element to this familiar genre, which is be with the actors, be the performance, be with them as they traveling to the city and as they performing and dancing, and have a chance to see the facial expression, because they're not just great dancers, they're also amazing actors. And being able to follow the actors' dances with the camera and registering the little nuances of the performance was just spectacular. It felt like we're watching a musical, but we are among them. It felt like we are one of the participants in the event rather than just being passive observers. Yeah.
That's why you're Janusz Kaminski, you know, because, yeah. Because we have seen many musicals that cut the legs off and do everything here. And by the way, this is Steven Spielberg's first musical. Yeah. And it took a while, but...
My wife actually saying to me, "You're going to make this," because I've been singing this at home. My kids, I've got videos of my kids actually doing West Side Story when they were 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. They were all doing this on video. And when I started working with Tony on this, and I chickened out 5 times, this terrified me. The idea of making West Side Story again terrified me. And I have to say that Kate was the one that kept the fires burning. She kept the home fires burning, and she kept saying, "You know, you could be scared today, but go to work tomorrow." And she was absolutely right.
That's good. Well, good for Kate. Ariana DeBose, what a performance in this. And and Ariana and I have met over Zoom a few times during the course of this season. And Ariana and I have met over Zoom a few times during the course of this season, and I've said it and I'll repeat it, but this is equivalent, you know, of somebody doing Hamlet, you know, when you have one of the greatest Hamlets sitting backstage watching your move, in the form of Rita Moreno, who's in this movie and is an executive producer. And so that adds to it. And talk about that, and actually your audition was interesting with Steven too, about what happened there.
Yes. Okay, so first part. Rita. You know, I can't say enough about her grace. You know, I've really been thinking a lot about that, like generational relationships in Hollywood. She made so much space for me, and she very quickly understood my anxieties and validated them. One of the first things she said to me was, "Honey, it's a lot." And it's a true story, and I really appreciated it, because most of my colleagues they weren't having the experience that I was having, but Rita means so much to all of us. So to an extent, yes, but I think the greatest way I can talk about really working with her is in the Doc's drugstore scene. And it's the only real scene that we share, but it's iconic. You see she's Valentina in our film, but you're watching, for anyone who knows anything about history, two Anitas in the same space. And she has since said that was very jarring for her. And I can imagine why. Like, for 60 years, it's been her. And I've recently realized, God, that must have been lonely to be the only one. And so to have the knowledge, for me, in my experience, this lived experience of having a woman make space for me to not only work and stand beside her, but thrive beside her. I'm not in front of her, I'm not behind her. I am very firmly standing hand in hand with Rita Moreno in the context of our film and in life, in this space in our community. And that is really special. And it's important for people to see that we are two very different types of Latinas, and each one is valid and has space and autonomy. And these versions of these characters are iconic in their own right. And it's a testament to the fact that the character is timeless and reinterpretations are important. because we immerse and infuse new energy into them so that the generations that are coming after us can watch them and see the lessons, see themselves in the work as we all grow and change, because the goal is that we all grow and change. So to have that experience with her has been nothing short of a miracle, because there's another version of the world, but perhaps it didn't go that way. So I am so fortunate to have had that. I know my colleagues, like, we have the greatest stories of story time with Rita Moreno. It's seriously, like I'm telling you, it's a riot. But that's what's great. That's what she gave us. She gave us life force. She gave us